solutions that, in essence, are the ones that have brought the very crisis of recession that we are now swimming in. The failure of politics continues because, we think that we can fix a failing economy, and run to China to have, nice toasts when we are failing to fix our politics that are creating this mess. And so I think, what makes me sad is the fact that, on the one hand, we've been warned, right? Because I think if you look, at the experience of the last 50 years, all of what's happening in all of our countries has been predicted. So we mustn't come here and pretend to be shocked that we are now, but we thought we were on a great growth trajectory, but then, the very same kind of fastest growing economies are some of the world's most unequal societies and, have like these massive discrepancies that actually question the very notion of what growth is. So all of this has been predicted. So, I want to kind of then move to a more kind of, aspirational place, because I guess, we're here for that, and I think it's been very refreshing today to sit and listen to, all of these fabulous, fabulous minds, that have been reflecting on our condition. And I sat there wishing so desperately how, instead of, kind of being in China, doing nice toasts and, trying to kind of do this beauty pageant, look, we are more attractive than the next, country game that our president's now busy on, had been sitting and listening to these 600 advisors who would have told him exactly what the problems are, what he needs to do, and how to fix, not just for today, this so-called crisis, and we must talk about whose crisis this is, but for the long term, and I think it's really tragic. And Mr. President, I don't know whether you are still, in China, but you might want to consider coming tomorrow. So, we know our problems. We know all of the things we have to do, and I want to. So then, I guess, what if we, knowing that, we've made some really tragic mistakes, we've failed in places where we could have succeeded, we withdrew from a space that we should have insisted belongs to us, and I guess that relates to the point that Jayati ended with. So what if we reclaimed our courage, and instead of boarding flights to China and to, everywhere to raise all this money that is never going to be our own or belong to our people or really be available to solve the real problems that we have to solve, what if instead those who have the kind of positional power went to sit with rural women to hear what the problems are and what the solutions, as imagined from their perspective, would be? What if we spend time sitting with mine workers to really hear how it is that we could reimagine the use of our natural resources for the benefit of the majority? What if we sat with community members who've organized themselves into cooperatives because, the promised jobs are not coming, and people know this and they are trying to build alternatives for themselves? What if we sat and spent time listening to them to hear how it is that we can reimagine this kind of notion of a market and build a market that belongs, is for, and by the people? What if we spend time listening to students, to African thought leaders, who are churning these kind of alternatives out and have been doing so? What if we sat and listen to grandmothers who understand the real secrets of our society and what lies at the heart of the work that we have to do, not just to build better economies, but to build a society that is just. What if, and you know, who can tell you exactly what the fault lines of our economic choices are, because those fault lines live and are written across their lives and their bodies. What if we then began to reimagine what an economy should be? Because I think for me, not being an economist, my problem starts with the very concept. What if we reimagined what an economy should be, what its outcomes should be, and on the basis, and how then we design the outcomes of this thing called an economy? What would an economy based on the basis of needs, interests, and capabilities of our people, how would that economy look? Ultimately, this is the work we must do. What if we have to force our imagination to a deep thinking place about what we at least are calling, for lack of a better word, a true people's economy could look like. An economy that structurally prioritizes the needs of the most excluded. An economy that rethinks this concept of the market. And one that doesn't externalize solutions and thereby erode the power of the very people to actually negotiate, because you can't negotiate with the market. The market, as we know today, dictates, and when the market sneezes, you have to say, yes, boss. And so actually, what does it mean for our autonomy as a nation state, as a people, and as a continent to continue to operate within this kind of market fundamentalist framework? So what would it look like for us to reimagine that? I think that Jayati, ended where I then want to, to go, and I'll also conclude as indicated on the same basis that something that I think, again, we know this because, clever feminists and clever people who are progressive have said it, that economics is political. And that it's not just about, inputs and outputs and products, it's about an entire faith of a people. And for that reason, as Jayati said, it's too important to leave to economists, and I dare to say it's too important to leave even in the hands of really well-meaning and progressive economists in Treasury. I think we have to seriously contend with the idea of why is it that our treasuries are the most important departments dictating the path of, of our entire countries. I think we've given them too much power. It's time to interrogate that, and I think it's time to think about what subverting that equation. And I notice, and I love some of my friends who have worked in Treasury and try to do good things. So this is not personal. But I'm making a political point here that for us to imagine what a true people's economy could look like cannot start with the Department of Treasury. It has to start on the basis of what are the people's needs, what are the interests, what are the capabilities, and how do we build an economy from the ground up that is more likely to include, if that's the language, that's the kind of intended outcome, that is more likely to be transformed structurally, because actually, this language of inclusion within a kind of capitalist economic and market-driven framework is not possible. So we must stop lying to ourselves saying we can just add more people, because actually, the quicker you add some, the next group is falling out. And so actually it's like going on a treadmill, and we end up being trapped like, mice caught in a trap, and playing a game that's a losing game. So I guess, the real task for us is clear. Yes, an entire nation, an entire people's fate is too important to leave to a president. That much we know. We have to build the kinds of social institutions that can truly represent and be accountable to our visions and our need. We have to stop this thing of the Tumamina Messiah, so we all kind of run behind the Tumamina, and we're not even engaging with what is the substance of this thing. We've done this thing for 24 years. Look where we are. We're talking today about a recession, and we're being told and lulled into a false belief that, our president is, and his friends in business, and because, of course, those are the people that matter, are going to solve this thing. It's transient. It's really just a hitch. Otherwise, we're going to cross over. So don't worry, sleep. But I guess for me, therein lies the call to action. If we take seriously that we have to rethink this thing called the economy, we have to rethink it from the ground up, we have to do the hard job of finding the language and working to build movements. Fantastic. I mean, I've been engaged in a discussion with my friends at IEJ, in their conception of this thing, and I really believe that building the intellectual muscle and the analytical muscle and the arguments and making them crisper, building the evidence is very, very important. So we need these kinds of institutes. But much more important for me is that we need a movement that fights and defines a new terms for a new and truly just economy. And I think if the intention ultimately of these kinds of forums is to power that movement and to really make this debate, which is kind of very mystified with lots of graphs, and some of us who can't even read graphs, we switch off, demystify and make this about the politics of living, and have an engagement that truly empowers people to be able to engage, so that we don't sit there as we mostly do, where a pale man in a suit is going to be telling us about what this recession means, and of course, defining the solutions on the basis of whose, of not even questioning whose recession this is. And so it's a tall order, but I wish those who are young and energetic, particularly here, and it's exciting that students have been leading this initiative, the work is very clear. And I think that coming out of here, I'm very excited about the possibility that not only do we come out with new language, a new language for a new imagination, for how we're going to leverage, deploy, distribute resources for more just outcomes, but that we can really get down to the ground to build a movement for a true and just economy that is the foundation for a true and just society. So all the best to everybody.
No, a truly brilliant panel. I'm not going to try and summarize anything you've said. Suffice to say that tomorrow's program includes some of the issues that have been raised, in particularly issues around the feminist economy. Some people will talk about eco-socialism, right? Ecofeminism. I'm not going to say, or eco-responsive economies, but these are the kind of issues that will be debated and discussed. by, amongst others, people like Pregs Governor. And I'm singling Pregs out because I think Pregs has been one of those heroes that we need to acknowledge whenever we see her. Thank you, Pregs. Okay. You know, changing the economies means changing societies, because if we don't, we actually do face an existentialist crisis. So the kind of issues that Patrick and others will be talking about the toxic economies, my term, not yours, needs to be addressed tomorrow as well. And this is the issue about the IEJ. It is designed to make you feel uncomfortable. Because if you feel comfortable, that means we're all agreeing and we're not going to move forward. The kind of debates and discussions that we must have must make us all feel uncomfortable, move out of our boxes, and really begin to think, what does rethinking economies mean, and what does rethinking society mean? I'd like to close, and before some people leave, I'd like to close by thanking a few other people, few organizations firstly. Rethinking Economics for Africa, both chapters at Wits and at UJ. Give yourselves a hand. The Institute for African Alternatives, Oxfam South Africa, the DST and the NRF South African Research Chair in Industrial Development, SACHI, okay, and the African Program on Rethinking Development Economics. Thank you very much. And then lastly, I'd like to introduce two pale males. and their brief is to depale us as we move forward. But they've been really instrumental in putting the IEJ together. I think the first person to be introduced is perhaps Neil. Now, can you stand, Neil? Neil Coleman is a long-serving activist and a stalwart within the trade union movement. And almost all of us in this room have had debates and fights with Neil around something. Okay. But I think we need to thank Neil. Gilad Isaacs, if you can stand as well. One of the things Gilad, when we were setting up and meeting people, was trying to warn Neil and myself, when we meet people, try not to be too left or too socialist. As is the refrain. So I think we did listen, right, Neil? But Gilad has been very instrumental in the National Minimum Wage Research Initiative here at Wits, which laid the basis for the discussions on the national minimum wage issues in South Africa. So thank you. So they are the co-directors of the IEJ, and we'd like to thank them for all their efforts. Okay, so that concludes our evening and the launch. I know there's a cocktail. Logistics of the cocktail, can somebody please downstairs? And then for those who still need programs for tomorrow and to see how we can be politically engaged, the programs are downstairs as well. So thank you all and go well.
Assigning new tasks. Take this, I can